Okay, Jesse's back. Haven't done a video in a minute, and I was thinking about my YouTube content. Not that I'm a YouTube content creator, but uh, what do I even do these videos for? Is this just for me to speak into the void? I think it kind of is. And as a result of that, and as a caveat to people who are first listening to this, I'm not an expert on anything. I just have a lot of experience playing games. It's what I do with my free time. And so I find myself being introspective and needlessly intellectual and academic about topics that ultimately are pretty trivial and subjective. And in the situation of ARPGs and Path of Exile, things that I think a lot about and care a lot about, I have graduated past just playing games for fun. I am now beyond that because I'm too old. I'm too old to be like only doing it to get dopamine. I'm now doing it for all kinds of other reasons. And Path of Exile is an interesting one. Do I consider myself an expert? No. Would I do things differently than GGG? Yes. There's no question it's like the best game on the market. And so you can't really dismiss anything that they've done. You can't fault them for anything. Having said that, the first question that I have listed out here that is in bold, what issues are facing the melee archetype in Path of Exile? Some of those issues have been present for a couple years, and I guess the reason I'm doing this video, part of it is looking ahead to the next League launch, sometime in December. But in a bigger picture kind of sense, I want to make like a definitive video on my opinion, on my stance, I guess. So, this is my hill. I might as well die on it. I'm planting my flag in the ground. What else? What else am I doing? Right? Fuck it. All these comments on Reddit, and I'm terminally online. I'm online all day, every day. I see every fucking comment. All these comments on Reddit, on Twitch chat, in comments of YouTube, in various places, I see an overwhelming amount of ignorance about the melee archetype. I play a lot of slams, so more on that later, but generally what I'm going to say applies to the whole archetype. There is a design problem with the archetype. There is a game flaw, a game design problem with the archetype. If we go into Path of Exile, and I go to my latest and greatest blast from the past, I just hit level 70 to get potential rewards. This is this is Sunder, okay? Another Berserker. I make a lot of Berserkers. So what do you see? What's the first thing you notice? Okay, this is an isometric RPG, right? Diablo 2, tons and tons of games are isometric ARPGs. This is like a best in class, no question. Great one. But what do you notice? Okay, look at the screen. You're a little dude. You have a overhead view. You're running around and clicking buttons at enemies, right? In Path of Exile, your enemies can be everywhere, 360 degrees all around you, off the screen, okay? And the way that skills work in Path of Exile, the way you can attack and defend, the way you can use your character and move your character around, similar just like any other ARPG, if you are away, if you are apart from the enemy, from what does damage to you, from your opponent, you are much more likely to protect yourself and defend yourself and dodge things and avoid things. I mean, that's like a game design thing. That's not a Path of Exile thing. That doesn't just apply to Path of Exile. And so a lot of the comments that I see on Reddit, on whatever thread is tilting me that I'm reading through, completely misunderstand the problem with the archetype. Yes, there are problems like lack of suppression. Suppression is the single best defensive tool in the entire game, and there's none of it on the left side of the tree. It's not, there are other problems. The other problems are the fact that fundamentally, the design of the game is such that you need to walk right up to the enemy, click on them, use your skill. And your skill, I mean, obviously this is Sunder, so this one goes pretty far, goes off screen, which is not common for a melee skill. We look at Double Strike or Glacial Hammer or something, okay, you're going to be a lot closer to the enemy, generally. So it's not just that the builds are bad from a numbers standpoint. Nodes in the tree are not as valuable as the other nodes on the other side of the tree. Things like flasks and suppression that are extremely OP in the meta right now, even if we're not talking about the meta, just as a game, trying to chase Maven around her arena with melee sucks ass compared to a totem build or something. Fundamentally, there are bosses and mechanics in the game where being melee is worse than being ranged or a caster. Just worse, objectively worse, you know? And this isn't like a, I'm not trying to make some like controversial video. I feel like this is just like, this should be knowledge that's appropriate for new players playing a game. But there's a reason that melee is in every other game. There's a reason that ARPGs always have melee classes. Is because they're fun. They fulfill the power fantasy. They fulfill a very specific and important niche in all these games. Generally, these builds are more tanky, more survivable. The whole point is that they can get right up and close, and you can bare knuckle box your enemy. That's like a fantasy. A lot of players like that. That's something that you want to fill, a void you want to fill if you're a designer of one of these games. And Path of Exile, the game itself, it doesn't really cater to that fantasy, I think. So is Path of Exile a competitive game? Does this even matter? Well, no. I mean, honestly, no. No. It's not a competitive game. And no, it doesn't really matter. None of this really matters. But like, saying this and asking this question is sort of disappointing in its own right. Like, why can I not talk about this? Can this be important to me? Yes, it can be important to me. Who gives a shit? And so I know the leaderboards for experience on Path of Exile PoE Ninja, where the first things you type in, experience is a terrible metric for, what is actually good and bad, especially in a softcore trade environment where the real competitive, quote unquote, competitive part of the game is actually the economy and not your experience, or even your damage, or whatever numbers you can put on a graph, on a chart like PoE Ninja. But I mean, that's kind of beside the point. Should game balance be a key factor when creating new content? So in the future, if GGG is trying to drive player engagement by building a new league mechanic, should they actually think that this type of build should play as efficiently and as productively as another type of build? Should they even think about that? Should they care about that? Or alternatively, should they say this league mechanic is designed purely for entertainment? It's just fun. We just like to click the buttons, and it's fun to watch things go boom and watch currency fly. Because those are two different things, And it's very, very hard to say the game is fun, the game is balanced. I think that oftentimes those are two very, very different sides of the same coin. Does game balance affect player engagement? Does it affect revenue? I mean, this is kind of a similar question. Me, as a player, I like to play slams and I like to play melee builds. And when I feel like I am being dusted by the players on the right side of the tree, the dead eyes, and I'm just getting absolutely smoked multiple leagues in a row, I do think it affects my engagement. I feel a little bit sad, a little bit worse trying to play my slam build, and grinding my way up to yellow maps while people are already juicing T16s. And I'm not trying to even say or suggest that I want to be at the top of the leaderboards. In fact, one of the other things I could write here is like player type is MTG player types, which I don't know if any of y'all have heard of this or care about this, but there's a Timmy, Johnny, and a Spike. And I had to just look this up to remind myself. A Spike is a Deadeye player who is probably doing an MF Deadeye, getting all the projectile tattoos and juicing Crimson Temples, right? The absolute optimal player one efficiency for getting as much currency and as quickly as possible. Like, then that Spike player is playing a meta build. And yeah, I mean, and so I am a Timmy is like the big spell person. And I am a Johnny, which is like the meme off meta person, the person who intentionally picks skills that are used by almost nobody in the player base. And I've been doing this for years now. I mean, this game is old. This game is very old. I have my account on pathofexile.com forums is from 2011. That is 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago. And yeah, as a player, part of the reason I'm even making this video is that I am a Johnny in the MTG sense. I'm an off-meta player. I used to call this a Shoop deck player because Gwent had a very off-meta build that was a Shoop deck. And I am a little bit frustrated, not just at GGG for not correctly addressing this problem that really has persisted for a couple years, but also at the player base for being a little callous and also callous and ignorant at the problems facing Melee. So obviously the defensive changes is one thing we could talk about. We could talk about how they added spell suppression. They fundamentally changed defensive auras. They reworked the game after the Arch Nemesis League when players got absolutely dunked on by rare mobs. They tried to figure out a way to make it work. But the reality that we're faced with now is that the majority of the time in Path of Exile, if you have enough offensive firepower to just kill everything before it even gets to you, that's one factor. And that's a factor that's probably like maybe the top of the tree, but also the right side of the tree. There are very, very, very few bottom left side of the tree builds that are blowing shit up before it even gets to you. It's very, very uncommon, and certainly not league start viable. So what are the alternatives? Well, in the case of the bottom left of the tree, it used to be that you had more access to life. Percent life nodes were more accessible and in greater numbers. You know, the 5%, 6% was down here, and only the 4% life nodes were up here. Well, they reworked the tree 1,000 times, and now that's not really true anymore. It's pretty much parity all across the board. But what's interesting now is that life nodes are not even relevant defensive tools anymore. You need things like spell suppression and damage reduction and physical taken as X. And the reality is that the tools available defensively on the bottom left of the tree are just not relevant. They're just not. The percentage armor and stuff, like these nodes where you get, damn, 24% armor, increased armor. Okay, that will not save you in a map. Not in modern Path of Exile. Everything is about elemental damage or chaos damage mitigation. And chances are the phys damage you do take, your armor is not saving you. It's not. Even if you have a lot of it, you're going to die in a map. You need suppression. For bosses especially, I mean, people have talked about this too, where bosses have resistance penetration. So you can't, even if you do increase your max res, you're still taking insane damage from bosses. So that's a little frustrating, and that has me a little jaded. The other thing is flasks. Now I know this is like a topic, a sort of a separate topic, but flasks I think are in a weird spot in this game right now. Defensively, it feels like flasks are overpowered, sort of in the way that auras used to be, but are also still, it's like auras and flasks, both still in the game, both equally have incredibly difficult balance challenges. If you're GGG, you've done a bunch of things trying to rework them, trying to, give them the instilling orbs and make the modifiers, change the modifiers. I think that is a balance puzzle that has yet to be solved. And I think the balance puzzle is causing the biggest suffering to the bottom left of the tree by far. Flasks and auras, if you are on the bottom left of the tree and you're trying to actually, imagine trying to take like the mace nodes right here and also trying to have flask uptime and good auras. Like what? You just don't have the tools in the tool belt that other ascendancies and classes do. You just don't. And I don't want to go on a mana rant, but having percent damage from strength and having flat life from strength, that is just not as important in Path of Exile for any build right now. It's really just not. It's people are like armor stackers and strength stackers. Those are two of the strongest builds of the game. Oh man, melee must be doing okay. Well, spoiler, that doesn't qualify. That doesn't answer our question. And it doesn't, I don't think that's a qualified response. Having these incredibly S tier, very, very end game builds that require insane amounts of currency and setup and gearing, So how do we actually solve this problem? How do you actually fix this problem? Well, I have thought of a couple of things you could do. And since we're doing a longer video, I might as well type some of them out. So here we go. How do we fix some of the melee? And when I say melee, I actually am kind of referencing the bottom left of the tree more generally, like this quadrant right in here, this area right here. Okay, so how do we fix some problems? So one is melee skills and Warcry skills cost too much mana, or cost any mana, ? And I'm going to put something right under this. Before we even talk about that, melee skills require too much accuracy. Require any accuracy, ? So this is like two factors of the same thing, right? One is you already have managing your mana cost and managing your mana. If you are league starting and you're on the top of the tree, that makes sense. You get mana from your intelligence and you're using spells. If you're on the bottom left of the tree and you're some brutish fucking marauder and you're just trying to pound your enemy down with ground slam, literally creating fissures out of the earth when you hit your axe. Okay, the mana flask thing is so fucking dated. It's insane. It is a completely irrelevant function in the modern Path of Exile. Having a mana flask and having to have it through T16s, through in-games, through, Uber Eater of Worlds or Uber Exarch, whatever thing you're like is your goal in mind, what do you want your character to do, having to rely and having mana problems as that archetype sucks ass, especially at League start, but even through the rest of the game. If we are doing some power fantasy stuff, mana and mana cost is in a weird place, but it sucks that all of the same annoyances for the other classes and the other archetypes also apply to the strength brute dummies. Like, don't make us have the same problems that the other classes do. We already have a hard time, facing enemies face to face, up close. Melee skills require too much accuracy, require any accuracy. This is something I've also thought about. A slam build that has an AoE that you are right next to an enemy and you hit it like this, and you see these huge fissures come out of the earth. Whoa, damn, that looks impressive. Okay, all that shit can miss. You can just whiff. Even though, visually you're like, how is that any different than Glacial Cascade, which cannot miss? This thing can miss. And it's weird that, like, you think about a bow, you're shooting a bow. Okay, I understand how that can miss. But if I'm doing some AoE thing, it's weird that accuracy is the exact same pain in the ass problem to solve and puzzle piece you have to fit into your gear, you have to squeeze into your suffixes as bow builds. And spell builds obviously just don't have to worry about it at all. It's like just another thing that gates slam builds from being actually good or S tier. And I don't know if on League start, I don't know how you exactly solve this problem. I think this build I'm experimenting with this, but I got the accuracy mastery thing. 500 accuracy rating, -2 accuracy rating per level. I think this is like one of their like, oh, see, we solved the problem. No problem. You can League start and not have your accuracy feel like dog shit. But that there's in no way does getting accuracy nodes solve that problem for slams. I feel like that just, you already are so node starved. We'll type this out. Fucking Warcry skills require too many skill tree points. This one is another one that I've talked about in the past, and I could keep talking about it. What if you look on the tree, look at some of the Warcry clusters. Warcry. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 opportunities to get Warcry masteries. That's, I don't know how many points. But if you compare the utility type things like curses or like what is something else that goes along with your skill, right? This, I've actually never done this before. Curses, you got a bunch of curse clusters here. The difference between all of these little utility clusters is that you can use a curse and you don't have to put points into curses. You don't have to. You don't have to plug in 1, 2, 3 and a curse mastery and then also hop up here 1, 2, 3 another curse mastery. That's 4 points, 8 skill points. You don't have to put those in order to use curses. You don't have to. You can just fucking use curses if you want to. I dare anyone to try to play a slam build. Try playing a League Start slam build with war cries, multiple war cries, with like seismic cry or something that's completely useless now. Try playing that build without putting any points into Warcry nodes. Not a single Warcry point. it feels like dog shit. It is one of the most miserable experiences. It takes forever to do each war cry. You basically have to do war cries before each pack, or you do no damage with no clear, no AoE. And this is, I mean, obviously we're just excluding the fact that your slam can miss. It feels so unbelievably slow. So I don't know how you solve that puzzle, GGG. Maybe you have to bite the bullet and admit that having cooldown rotation based war cries that are the only way that slams even compare to other archetypes, spells or bows, you almost have to have permanent uptime on your war cries just to have them socketed in and then they suddenly apply to your slams. And even then, war cry builds are so socket starved that it sucks. So I don't know how you solve that. I mean, I'll say socket starved. This is an easy one. For slams specifically, socket starved. I don't know how you solve that problem without doing an extreme buff, like a profound buff, triple the base warcry speed, keep the warcry uptime for like 20 seconds per warcry, and maybe you have to adjust balance beyond that. But I'm talking about people who are actually using warcries for like a two-hand slam build, because you have to compare it to the other archetypes here. I wouldn't be saying any of this if like you had to cast a bunch of other shit every single time before you shot your bow. Like that would feel awful, which is kind of what slam builds feel like. They kind of feel awful, especially if you've been playing, Flicker Strike or something, and then you switch over and try to play slams and you use all the war cries. It feels really bad. All right, I'm slowing down here. I guess this is the end of my rant. I feel like I still have so much to say, though. That's the crazy part. There's still so much more we could talk about here. I know we're missing a couple important pieces. Did I mention that I will play slams next league, no matter what they do, even if they don't touch it at all? Did I mention that? I love it. But, yeah, it's tough out here. It's tough. Damn. Okay. Well, this was a hell of a ride. Hope you all. I don't know if y'all are going to listen to the whole thing. This was a lot. Okay. Love you. Bye.